Hello and welcome to Dialogue of Civilisations. Syria's Bashar Al-Assad has finally been toppled. He fled Damascus and is currently in Moscow. His eventual demise has perhaps been the foregone conclusion for some considerable time, yet it did not seem so imminent, at least in view of many, just 2 weeks ago. Assad has gone, and what is next? What sort of country Syria will be under its new rulers? What will be the nation's new place in the grand and ever-changing scheme of geopolitics and a global tug-of-war? Where will Syria find itself in the wider dialogue of civilizations? My guest today is Mr. Hamdi Rifaid, advisor and analyst on government relations from the United States. Mr. Rifaid, it's a great honor to welcome you.
It's my privilege. Thank you.
Mr. Rifaid, Assad himself was once the future, back in early 2000s. We remember him being courted in the UK and France, and some nice words being said about him. And what was the essence of that initial evaluation about him, which was perfectly plausible, and why he managed to pull the strings in Syria for so long?
Initially, when Bashar al-Assad came to power, it was really welcomed even by Syrians. Syrians saw him as the possible reformer. He wasn't the one groomed by his father, Hafiz al-Assad, to take over Syria. His brother was the one that was expected to take over, and he was the one that most Syrians dreaded as the next president because they knew that he would be a tyrant that would kill, murder, torture. But Syrians knew also that Bashar was trained in the UK as an eye doctor, and that he had been exposed to the West. And so many Syrians saw this as helpful, that there might be a future for Syria. Remember, when he took office, Syria was in the dark ages. It really was. No banks, no opportunity. And for a moment, many Syrians saw that he was making some reforms. But those reforms lasted about a minute.
And so Assad was the future once, and those who have taken over Damascus also claim that they are the future of the country. Who are these new groups, factions who are in charge of the country, and what sort of governance they're going to put into practice in Syria, you think?
I think it's important to keep in mind that the new Syria is a grand total of 2 days old. Yeah. So I don't know that we can say that HTS has aspirations to be the new government or the replacement for Assad. In fact, I think that there's every reason to believe that they don't expect to be the new government because they've already started to transition Syria away from military rule into civilian rule. We've seen them hand over the bureaucracy. We've seen them retain the state structure. We've seen them over the past 8 years also become more pragmatic. And we've seen them govern to whatever extent they needed to be, hand in hand with civilian authorities in Idlib. So I don't think that, and in fact, there's already been an appointment of someone responsible to transition to a civilian government, even in Damascus. And from what we've seen from the rules already issued by the HTS and other rebel groups, they have every intention of offering these equal rights for all Syrians.
Yeah, I think that the rebels made it very clear that they will be governing for the best interests of all Syrians. They mentioned all sects and so forth. So when one looks at a tapestry of different ethno-religious groups inhabiting Syria, one wonders what sort of inclusive governance could be constructed there. Of course, it's too early to say what kind of government type these new rulers of Syria will be promoting in Syria. We always talk about democracy and things of that nature, but I suppose the key fundamental moment to bear in mind now is just the effective governance, because Syria was widely under Assad described as a failed state. I presume the key focus now is not too much about democracy, but about effective civil governance. Do you share this sentiment that is being expressed by many people in this country and the wider region?
Well, that's exactly what we're expecting, that there will be a growth of civil society. Assad crushed civil society. Anyone that had anything to say was tortured, arrested, killed, and as we've seen from the prisoners released from Sednaya, the unspeakable things that were done to them, there was no opportunity to contribute to the state. So the state was just one criminal family controlling everything. And that's why it could never develop. And that's why Syria looked like it was in the dark ages and in fact was a failed state. The new Syria appears to already be an opportunity for civil society. People that didn't leave their homes out of fear, that threw their trash in the streets, are leaving their homes, cheering in the streets, smiling, cleaning up the streets. There's already a degree of voluntarism, of civil society, of participation with neighbors. This is something never seen in Syria. In Syria in the past, people were afraid to talk to their neighbors. It was just survive. And now we see that there's a brotherhood and a sisterhood of meeting people and working together. And I think that the hope is that that will continue. And I think that there's every reason to believe that that will continue, because amnesties have been already granted to people that worked for Assad. People that were part of the government are being incorporated within the government, the new government, so long as they didn't commit crimes. So the few people at the top that were the worst offenders will be prosecuted, and then the rest are being granted amnesty. That is a recipe for people to participate in society and create a civil society that it makes a state that's cohesive.
And also, we understand that, of course, those people involved at the upper crust of the former government will be persecuted, but other remnants of the former government will be integrated into the future system, political structures of the country. About the geopolitics, everybody is saying that the geopolitics of the region has changed. And so let's talk about those external actors. And Russia and Iran, they seem to have lost ground in Syria. What will be their reaction? I mean, bearing in mind that we have some time limitation, I want to put one question and with two elements ingrained in its core about Russia and Iran, because some people are saying that one consequence of this could be that Iran's leaders may feel that in order to preserve a deterrence, they now need to move forward and actually put a piece of a nuclear bomb together. So they will sort of accelerate that process as a result of losing their key ally in Syria. So the question is very basic. What to expect from Russia and Iran?
Okay, so I think that we can look at their official statements first. With Iran, we've seen their official statement has been that Iran will continue to try to have an influence in Syria to protect its sectarian interests. In other words, the religious beliefs of Shiites in Syria. So they're trying to say that they are the protectors of Shiites, and that if Shiites are not or somehow discriminated against, then they will try to intervene in Syria again. And as we know, they intervened previously on this pretext as mercenaries fighting for Assad, despite the fact that in Syria we have many Shiite religious important places, like for example in Damascus, where Shiites have gone for pilgrimage before. And at no point in history have Syrians, Sunni Syrians or Christian Syrians or otherwise tried to destroy these sites. So we know that Iran is going to continue to play this game of sectarianism. However, there's very little opportunity there for them to actually do it, because most have left. Most of those pilgrims and people that stole properties from Syrians have left. Those schools will be closed. And I think there's going to be a very, very great deal of suspicion of anything Iranian in Syria again. It'll be many years before they can have a seat at the table to talk about anything domestically. And I doubt there'll be any real bilateral relations between Syria and Iran for a very long time. As for Russia, Russia had started to pull out its S-400 system. It's now stopped to some extent and is holding on to its base in Tartus. I think it's going to try to leverage that in exchange for in exchange for having a seat at the table, or, and I think this is not unfounded, we might see Russia trade Assad for prosecution in order to keep its Tartus space. Russia has now granted asylum to Assad. The first Syrian to be granted refugee status in Russia has been Bashar Al-Assad. And I think that's because maybe that's their bargaining chip to stay and keep some influence in Syria. They want that naval base in Tartus. And I wouldn't be surprised if they see a trade there.
And what about Turkey, a very, very important and fundamental player in the region?
Well, Turkey is the winner here.
Yeah. Could you explain why?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could you explain why Turkey is a winner?
Turkey has proven itself to not only be a regional power, but a world power now. Because now the scorecard is 0-3, Russia 0, Turkey 3. Now it's been shown that Turkey can battle Russia anywhere again and again and win. It won in Libya, it won in Azerbaijan, it won now in Syria. Turkey has proven itself adept diplomatically, militarily, technologically, and it has the patience and the strategic understanding to position itself with its own independent foreign policy backed by strength. This is something that very few nations are capable of, and I think we're going to see that Turkey has an even bigger role in the future in Syria, because now there's been a creation of a bilateral relationship there between Turkey and Syria that may be unbreakable.
And United States of America, we know that President Biden and also President-elect Trump, they welcomed the fall of Bashar al-Assad. They also expressed a degree of uncertainty about what is to come next. But we know that the future Director of National Intelligence of the United States, Mrs. Tulsi Gabbard, earlier in the past, back in 2017 and 18, expressed support for the Syrian government in a very sort of nuanced way. He described Bashar al-Assad as a quote, brutal dictator, but still said that the Hezbollah and Iran and Russia are actually working together against our common enemy, the common enemy of the United States. What do you think her personality mean at this very juncture? What sort of lady is she? And will she be able to exert some influence on foreign policy? Although her position is not about foreign policy, it's about national intelligence, but still.
Okay, it's important to note two important things about Tulsi Gabbard. One, that she is unqualified for the position. So we're going to see a lot of opposition just based on the fact that she's completely unqualified to be the Director of National Intelligence. But more importantly, we're going to see a lot of opposition to the confirmation of her nomination by Donald Trump, because not only has she made statements contrary to American interests, she's acted contrary to American interests. Let's go through that. She visited in Armenia. She supported Russian elements that were against U.S. elements in Armenia. She has supported ethnocentric separatism again and again. She didn't just make statements in support of Assad, she went there. Yeah. She met with Assad, she went through Syria, she made and created propaganda for the Assad regime to perpetuate the Russian misinformation. So she has not only spoken or taken positions that might be debatable, she's acted against American interests. And I think that's going to come up. Right now, during this week, she's making the rounds through Congress, trying to get her nomination confirmed. But there's a lot of whispering going on. And everyone I've spoken to says this isn't going to happen because she is an agent of Russia. And there's a common thread here. She went to Armenia and supports Armenia, not because she's particularly in support of Christians. No, she's a Hindutiva, right? She's a member of a cult, essentially. It's because she was acting against Muslims and she perceives Azerbaijan as a Muslim state, even though Azerbaijan is a very secular, open state where everybody can practice their religion freely. She supported Assad not because he's an Alawite, but because he was killing Muslims. She supports Israel not because she's Jewish, but because Muslims were being killed. This is a common thread. And this is not an accident. Her politics and her intelligence or understanding of events is not determined by security interests or collection of intelligence. It's determined by her own biases because she's a member of a cult.
And you already partially replied to this question, the question that I'm about to ask now. What countries here in the South Caucasus, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, should make of this fall of Bashar Al-Assad? What will be the implications? What sort of relations these countries may have with the future Syrian government?
Well, I think it's very clear that Armenia is a puppet of Russia, acted for Russia in Syria, and Syria acted for Armenia. So they were part of a conspiracy to act against the international will, against the international law. In Karabakh, where the whole world recognizes it was Azerbaijan, Syria was doing the opposite. Syria was supporting Armenia. Now we've seen a statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan, indicating that Azerbaijan will support the humanitarian needs of Syrians. It's clear who the good guys and the bad guys are. I hate to put things in black and white here, but sometimes there is a black and white. And while we all need to understand and be pragmatic about international affairs and the geopolitics of the region, Azerbaijan now has a future opportunity for growth and influence throughout the world, and to have a very strong ally right next to Israel, where there could be budding relations between Syria and Israel. And Armenia now is yet again going to be left away, off of the table, and with Russia.
Mr. Rifaid, thank you very much indeed for your time. Perhaps my last question, it's not a political program, Dialogue of Civilization, but we discuss current affairs in the context of wider Dialogue of Civilizations, of course. How do you see the future of Syria as a nation within this wider, ever-changing scheme of the Dialogue of Civilizations? It's a country with a great history. It's a very multi-ethnic country, but also a very troubled country, torn into pieces. How do you see its future within this wider tug of war in a geopolitical sense of the word?
Well, when the revolution started in 2011, nobody could find Syria on a map. Now everybody knows where Syria is. Now most of the world understands that what happens in Syria doesn't stay in Syria. And I don't say that like some sort of just jingoistic, convenient phrase. It's actually true. Syria historically has been the crossroads of the world. It is located geographically next to Turkey. It's not an accident that Turkey is as influential throughout the world and as successful as it is. It's in part because of its geography. Syria is a gateway to the Middle East, to the Arab world. It holds it's been a mosaic because it has been able to keep most ethnic peoples happy, other than, of course, during this period with Hafez al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad. And I think it's important to note that it was during this period when we saw the decline of Jews and Christians from Syria. So now that we are free from Bashar al-Assad and Hafez al-Assad, I think we're going to see Syria return back to its role of being an important player in geopolitics throughout the world and have an importance that is well beyond its borders.
Mr. Hamdi Rifaid, I'm very, very grateful to you for your time. We had an absolutely fantastic conversation.
God bless you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Always a pleasure, my brother. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much indeed. Pleasure is mine.
Take care, Orkhan.
My guest today was Mr. Hamdi Rifaid, analyst, expert on government-related matters, who joined us from United States. When one observes a group of insurgents in an Arab country toppling monuments of their former ruler, chanting freedom and victory, one is never sure what is to come next. One can only hope that Syria's civil war is now definitively over, and the country itself and the wider region are to reap the benefits emanating from this momentous development very soon. Hoping is never bad, but hope alone is insufficient. Looking forward to welcoming you to the next episode of Dialogue of Civilisations.